Good day, my fellow Americans and good people of the world. Today I would like to address you in regards to the present situation. I know that many of us Americans and good people of the world are looking about the present situation, and we are concerned about where things are going. And I'm hoping to present a little bit of a shining ray of hope that might be able to get us through these present circumstances into somewhere where we are on more stable ground and a solid footing, that we can move forward beyond this unfortunate historical reference that we are living in as our present day scenario. And what I would like to do first is acknowledge that the way things are going right now is not what we would hope it to be. And there are many of our institutions that have been long-standing, many of our norms that have been long-standing, our traditions, our way of doing things, protocols, procedures, decorum, laws that are no longer being adhered to by many of those in the highest ranks of authority in the United States of America in particular. And that has caused, of course, a lot of disruption and discord and chaos, and a lot of fear and doubt and uncertainty has taken hold in the hearts and the minds of so many people. Right now, we are collectively going through a grieving process. We're in the process of grieving the America that was and that is no longer. And we have to go through this process, but I'm here to give hope, to say that sometimes we have to go through the process of letting go of what we once were in order for us to grasp that which we are meant to be. Because, see, the way I see it, America wasn't working for everybody before this whole pandemonium took hold in our way of life. There were many people that were struggling every day, and through the years, there were whole populations of people being left by the side of the road. And that, in a broad generalization, of course, could mean the entire world, because that's been the case. But speaking in reference specifically to America, because that's the experience that I know as an American. And I have seen this transformation of our nation to go through, what was considered this like peak time of, possibilities. And it seemed like there was so much opportunity to be seized, and that anybody could have a piece of the pie, and all you had to do was work hard and you would get it, and there was a way to level yourself up. But beneath that facade, there was this, institutionalized, structurally embedded, systematic oppression of certain parts of the population, mainly be it people that were of a race other than white. And for people who grew up in an income bracket or a particular part of a city that could be deemed more affluent, America worked for those people. And it was rigged systematically to benefit those people. And it was rigged systematically to oppress people that didn't fit a certain type of keep in the categories. And because of that, you know, as the population grew, demographics changed, people move, you know, families grow, population shifts. There became this sense that there was a whole structural impediment in society that people were falsely led to believe that you would be able to transcend that if you worked really, really hard. But that was not the case. And it's not to say there aren't some people of certain, you know, outcast groups didn't make it through, but they had to do that with tremendous sacrifice, and they were the exception, not the rule. And we've seen, I mean, so many different waves of these occurrences where, you know, the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. And every time we try to have a social safety net built up to try to, like, help keep people's head above water, you know, help them to survive without too much of a struggle, something happened in these upper echelons of society, the people who had the most money. Something happened in their world that made all of that come crumbling down. And the rest of society was put on the hook to pay the way to bail these people out. And there has never been a time in modern history where there has been an elite upper echelon of society bailing out the lower echelon of society. All of the income shifts and the wealth shifts always shift to take more from the many to concentrate it into the few. And what's become problem with that, of course, is that this has perverted the world paradigm of people in this, what I like to call, deviant echelon of society. They deviate from what is conducive to a healthy, sustainable, just, and peaceful world paradigm for everyone. They're greedy, and they're selfish, and they take too much, and they disregard humans, and they exploit them, you know, at disadvantage. People are looked at as, you know, opportunities to extract from, you know, not partners in this development of civilization to which we are all eternally bound to here on planet Earth. And, you know, you can go back in history, this has happened forever. There's always these deviants that think, you know, that they deserve it all and that they need it all, and they're going to, you know, pursue, and they're going to conquest, and they're going to go after whatever, and nobody and nothing is going to stop them. But that's why governments were created, you know, to help to solve for the conflict resolution between people with conflicting interests, to solve for the intractability of problems where you have, you know, one class of society that has rigged systems that where they get to keep most, if not all, of the resources, which prevents everybody else from having just the basic, fundamental, life vital resources that they need. And society struggles to function, and in that dysfunction, the people in the upper echelon of society seek ways to innovate out the problem of needing to have people and to take care of them so that they can take care of you. This is probably the driving force that caused automation to happen. It's like humans are an impediment to them being able to concentrate power. Pesky humans, they need so much, such needy creatures. And so you see now this trending of automation and artificial intelligence, and it's innovating out all of the jobs that we've managed to create as a society to keep people busy and work. Because in the functionings of society as it's developed in this type of civilizational structure, especially in this highly independent orientation in the West, people have to work in order to earn money, in order to make a living, in order to make a life. What you give is what makes your life. And what you do in terms of like work, that's not who you are, but it's how you become of service to society. And so there's a deep human value to that many of these people who are more interested in how can I shave dollars off of my bottom line so that I can absorb more profits, so that I can assume more capital, so I can gain more power and control and hoard more resources. Not thinking for a second about the people that are being left behind and discarded by this orientation of putting profits at the center and the core of everything they do instead of people. And they're forgetting this human need to be of service, to be of value, to have purpose. And that's the sort of thing that drives, when you look at the, psychological and sociological construct of, the art of living together in cities, which is what a civilization is, essentially. You have people in the upper echelon being mad that they're seeing cities deteriorate, or to crime to proliferate, or hooliganism and heathenism and grime and crime and all of these things proliferating in streets, and they're so frustrated with it, and they just don't want to see it anymore. And their solution is to just lock everybody up and force them into some sort of like punitive control, because humans are just like these terrible, irredeemable creatures, and society becomes smaller and smaller in terms of those who have the power. It's concentrated into the few, and how they deal with everybody else, because they don't know how to administrate, the functionings of a functional society for everyone. They only know how to gear things towards their self-centered needs. They leave everybody else by the side of the road, and then they punish them, for being so deviant to their needs. When you look at it, it's like the way of life that they are creating for and they're solving for and they're building for only allows for their continued success and well-being. And they don't care about you, and you'll never make it in their world, and you'll never succeed in their world. Their world's not meant to benefit you. Their world's not meant to, be positive in terms of return on investment for you. They need you right now to fill a position, to fulfill a task, accomplish a role, in the meantime, till they can find a way to innovate out the need for you to be there anymore. And then when they're done, they'll discard you, and you will no longer be their concern. And they like it that way. But see, the problem is that those are the type of people that should not be in charge of the advancement and development of civilization. They have their place, they have their role. Everybody has a part in the grand scheme. but it certainly isn't to dictate and determine the way in which things will go. They're innovators, and so they should, encourage us, broaden our horizons, inspire us to do great and amazing, wonderful things. Yes. Advance in technology, certainly. But they shouldn't be the ones informing policy that helps to carve the way by which that'll happen, because they choose the path of least resistance for themselves and the path in which they will be able to accumulate and hoard more resources for themselves. So you see, these people who are geared towards amassing profit and wealth and hoarding resources for themselves have no consideration for the everyday common human. They're willing to leave whole populations of people beside the road, and they do it, and they've done it. Just take, for instance, what happened during COVID. The whole world came to a standstill, didn't it? And in that time, the people who had accumulated money, capital, assets, resource, translated that into, we still have to make money, even though the economy can't function the way we were making money before. Human ingenuity kicks in, let's get innovative about it, and then they brought this whole new approach to still extract value from people and consumers, to feed the coffers of their company, and they were able to switch their business models in order to make sure that they were going to continue on. And that's good. I'm glad they found a way to survive through it all. But the problem is that these brilliant minds, these so-called, futurists and technologists, and these brilliant, innovative minds and whatnot, these inventors, these creators, could have spent that time looking at the precarious situation that we were in as a society and said, hey, you know what? We have some vulnerabilities. We have some weaknesses that really need to be shored up. And so why don't we find innovative ways to solve for that, so that, we never have to worry about that being, something to which people can be disadvantaged through, or that people could be harmed through, or that civilization will become destabilized because of. And it's not to say that there weren't some innovative, ideals that came out of that. But for the most part, people realized, my company has to still produce these things, and production was down because humans weren't there. This is all the more reason to adopt automation. And they're perfectly fine with firing people, and they don't care about the fact that what they're creating is this terrible, precarious situation of, we need people to have money to transact with us, to buy our products. But we're firing everybody, so they don't have jobs, they don't make money, so they can't buy these things. And so what do all corporations do? They always look to luxury, and they look to the people who have the money. And there's vast wealths of people that, just pass it along to their children and to their friends, and there's this whole rigged system in terms of, speculation, where people can, make money off of nothingness. And those are the people that they cater to. Those are the people they create products for. And so in their world, anybody who doesn't have an accumulated mass of money and don't trade on the stock market, and make money off of essentially gambling, not to say that it's wholly, a terrible thing, because it's functional, it has a purpose, it has a place in society, but it shouldn't be. That's why we're in such a precarious place as a nation right now, is we turn into, a nation of transacting financials, and a nation that, transacts legal frameworks, caseloads, things like that. Those are the two things that make the most, functionality in our society. And the things that are part of the, tangibilities, instead of just everybody suing everybody, and, everybody, automating systems out or whatever, or pandering to, people who can afford luxury. The things that are the meat and potatoes, the backbone and the fundamentals of the rest of society is healthcare, you know? And so we are becoming a more sick society. We're less able to afford our healthcare, which is why we become more sick. And that is, the basis by which, like, we hold up, if there even is to be called a middle class anymore, is through our healthcare system. And when these people get in positions of power and authority and decision making over the governance of society and, like, directing how we're going to go, what are the things that they attack in terms of saying, like, we're not going to fund those things anymore? It's healthcare. And so it's a direct attack on people in the middle class. It's kind of like they built this whole ladder structuring of, like, gambling money, which is nothingness, and doing Bitcoin, digital currencies, which is transacting nothingness. And they've created this whole casino world of transacting with one another so they can afford to buy the luxury that they're automating to produce so they can make more money. And don't you see how there's a whole bunch of people that don't belong in that world? And I'm not okay with that. It's one thing to, want to be able to have, an upper echelon of society, where you can have fine things and luxury and it's okay to an extent, but not when that exists intentionally to sacrifice everybody else from being able to live the good life. And so those sorts of people shouldn't have authority to make decisions over the rest of us, because their hearts and their minds, and the attitude and direction of their heart is not directed towards outcomes that are good for everybody. So when we saw a mass shift of wealth happening in the COVID pandemic, that was an indicator of they don't care about you. This isn't about we're all in this together. It's about them securing a world paradigm in which they will continue to prosper and everybody else will be left by the side of the road. The same thing happened in the 2008 financial crisis. All of these people knew that they were doing the wrong thing and shit was going to hit the fan eventually, and it did. And then guess who was put on the hook to salvage, all of the risk taking that all of these, people who had massive assets and resource to be able to gamble with this, it was like playing hot potato. They knew the time was going to run out. It was just like who wasn't holding the potato at that moment was going to be the person who's going to be able to make it through. And in the end, the few who, outlasted were then saved by the American taxpayers who footed the bill to prop up these companies that continued to pay their CEOs tremendous amounts of money. And now I get it. I totally understand. Like, if you don't pay these people enough money, they won't stay in these roles, and then this whole business structure and system just doesn't work. It's hard to be competitive in that way. I get it. But again, it has a place and it has a purpose. But that can't be the central thing that we focus on as a society. It just can't. There's a movie that one of my friends was just referencing with me. We were talking about the recent space flight that took off, and we were talking about different sci-fi stories that we appreciate and we value, and talking about, why most sci-fis are kind of dystopian, and the idea of we have this, like, thing in our head somehow that seems to think that, society has to have some sort of break or fracture, and all of the people that are dead weight to the future that, the upper echelon, the deviants, are pushing for are meant to just be left as sacrifice to fend for themselves. And so in this story, because this is actually prevalent kind of theme that happens in sci-fi stories, the concept of Elysium came up, which if you're not familiar with it, just a, warning of, letting you know what's going to happen in terms of the story. It just breaks down to kind of like where we have been in like the same circumstance with COVID and, with the financial crisis, and where we are very much at with the AI bubble. Like, I can't believe people didn't see this one coming. I mean, they have, but, they didn't care because it's get in and play hot potato, right? And the whole idea of Elysium essentially is, spoiler alert, is the upper echelon found a way to create this, higher, above earth, perfect society. And that's where all the rich people live, and they have everything they want, everything they dream, and they can technologically advance, and the laws and the rules, yeah, they're very constraining, and it's kind of like, at least they had their delicious soma, and the people on Earth who were abandoned there were left in this shitty situation of years of neglecting the realities of climate change and, population destabilization, the fundamental deterioration of infrastructures and systems, and dysfunction in one area bred, corruption in another, which bred violence overall, which became just this like self-reinforcing system of a dog eat dog, mighty crush the weak, free for all hellscape. And while I don't think that we're headed specifically to that type of thing anytime in the, near future, in that movie, essentially, they created like, an orbiting kind of ship outside of, off of planet Earth, but still within, the gravity. So it benefited from many of the benefits of Earth and its Goldilocks zone and whatnot. But we're seeing something like that already happen in societies where you have like whole sections of, cities that are being fenced off in gated communities. Separation of people, separation of resources, and, separations of funding that's determining who wins and who loses, who has opportunity and who is set at a disadvantage intentionally. Like, these things are happening all of the time in society. And you have literally some of these like technocrat, futurist people who have read one too many sci-fi books and did not gain and grasp the moral meaning of the story or the point of the exercise. They took it in the totally wrong direction. It's supposed to inspire you and to warn you of the potentials of doing it wrong. And they're very much taking it in the wrong direction right now. But being as they are, and their motivating force seems to be about accumulating the capacity to be the one who makes the difference in the future and forces the future in the direction they want to go. And they want to be the overlords of this new future that they're creating. Those people are the ones that are making decisions of trying to create surveillance states to help to control the population. They're the ones that are standing in the way from prescription drugs being affordable for people who need it. They're the ones that are sitting in the chambers of our highest institutions of governance and determining that in order for America to be great, we must cut off the lifelines of social safety nets that are the things that are keeping people alive and breathing. Essentially, our government is consigning people in America to death so that they can afford to go and rain death upon the people of another foreign country for military adventurism that leads to nowhere and has no purpose. And these people are making decisions to rig systems out of favor, because the more they disenfranchise, the more they disadvantage, the more they put people in a position where there's no way for them to get out of this precarious situation. And they, in the meantime, foster policies that drive up the cost of everything, so what little that you do have goes less far. It prevents you from ever getting to a point where you would be able to stand up against it. Start being able to be in the halls of justice and be in the positions of government, the chambers of government and decision making, to make decisions on behalf of the best interests of everybody instead of just the few people in this deviant echelon of society. And they work with each other to create policies that rig things into their favor and out of the favor of everybody else. And now the current, presidential administration is choosing to essentially take everything that was once the value of America, our soft power, gone, evaporated, intentionally, by design. Our alliances that kept us safe, that would have had somebody come in and step in on our behalf in America if things became so corrupt that our government turned against the people. Our allies aren't going to come and save us from that scenario, because the people in positions of power screwed over those relationships. In the meantime, there's a for-profit scheme that is allowing for contracts of millions of dollars of taxpayer funds going to prop up companies of AI that may or may not do anything of any value or use. And to prop up companies that are willing to use their technology in nefarious ways in order to help the government of the United States conduct war against other countries. And again, create a police state within our nation, create a surveillance state within our nation, ways to build up whole concentration camps to be able to put people in, because if people don't have jobs, they're not going to be able to pay for things. They're going to be easily targeted as an outsider. They can be cast without, needing to go through any sort of court processing, no due process, and just thrown into a concentration camp where they will receive, poor treatment and abuse and neglect and violations of human rights, and they won't be fed well, and they won't receive medical treatment, and they'll be confined, without even going through a court process. They'll be disappeared into these places. And that's where they have plans to send everybody, because they don't know how to deal with the fact that there's so many of us. And they have no use or need for us. They don't value us, and they don't see, any reason to care about you. So what are they going to do with you? You're a nuisance. You're an obstacle in their way. And if they can just get rid of you, then you no longer stand a chance to uprise against them. You no longer stand a chance to vote them out of those positions of power. And they don't need you, because they've reinforced this whole system in which, the deviant class of society will be able to continue to, foster the proliferation of their capitalistic structures. And right now they're not really caring so much about money. Yes, money is a transactor, and so, they accumulate it as just another resource, but what they care about is having the power to determine what next is going to happen. And I'm not trying to be super negative about this, because my job is to look at the scenario universe and to see the worst possible outcomes that have some realm of potential. And to, kind of follow out, where would things go if things led in that way. It's also my job to see, the best potentials that are out there, the potential that exists for us to turn things around, you know? And it's also my job to make sure that I look to this deviant echelon of society and find a way to bring them back down to humanity. To help them to see that, like, while their vision of this fantastic future may seem great, they would be able to go so much farther and be able to do so much more. And it would be something of prestige and something of pride and something that is good and is right. If they just did that with the rest of us, you know, instead of looking at it as a thing that they have to isolate and it's for a select few, like, really embrace the fact this could be something for all of us, you know. America, and in fact the world, can work for everybody without the disadvantage of anyone, so that nobody gets left behind or kept behind and everyone lives the good life. And I want that for America because I care deeply about everybody. I don't want anybody to be left behind, you know? And I see vast potential in everyone, you know? And what these people in the deviant echelon fail to see, that I'm hoping that I can open their eyes and their minds and their hearts to, is the fact that they need us. Because there's things that they don't know the answers to, that they'll never be able to discover the answers to them. Because the person who has the answer, who is the living answer to that question that they have, the very thing that may save them from themselves, you know, is a person that's living in a state of poverty right now, who doesn't have a lot of opportunities afforded to them, who is struggling to get by, and has, you know, all the capacity to realize this, you know, brilliant solution to this impending or current problem, and they are being stifled by the circumstances of a society that has neglected to care for all people and to bring out the best in all people and to help them to self-actualize to their best version. You know, I know there's many people in the upper echelon, the deviant echelon of society, that thinks that we live in abundance for them, but, you know, there's not enough for everybody. And so they feel like they have to take away from everybody else or deplete them in order to make sure that they have enough for what they need to accomplish. You know, and it's the same concept, the quote, "There's enough for everyone's need, but not enough for man's greed." And it's true if you do things intentionally. What I argue is that if we create a situation, you know, a scenario universe in which America does work for everyone, what we will get out of that is an abundance of productivity. So these brilliant, fantastic futures that these people want to build out for will come about much faster, because you'll have all hands on deck. And you'll have brilliant minds, and they know this because they steal from people's ideas all the time that work for them. You'll have brilliant minds that have ideas of how to do things differently. Human ingenuity is the most abundant, renewable resource in the entire universe. And I only say that in a sense of, like, you know, it goes on as long as humanity goes on. And everything that we've done and everything that we have in potential to still do can be realized in tremendous leaps and bounds of our, you know, technological advancement, you know. And if you leave people by the side of the road, they will never be able to reach their highest potential. And so you're leaving that person that is the living answer to that ultimate question that you're going to need in order for you to get past a certain point. And you're setting yourself up for failure by failing to recognize the value in other people, the value of all life. And what I argue is, yeah, it's challenging to administrate to such a large body of people who are varied and they're diverse and they're different and they have their own interests and their own wants, their own faults and their own failings, their own successes, their own talents. It's a lot to be able to administrate a opportunity of a situation in which all people can thrive, and that in that thriving they have something to offer to the rest of us in terms of service. But it's not an impossible task. It is the more difficult one. It is much easier to force and confine and to punish and to control people. Yes, that is the easier thing to do, because you can rig systems that confine people and set it and forget it. But with caring for people, it takes a constant, intentional work at it. And while I understand that many of these people in the, deviant echelon, they have better things to do, in their opinion, than to worry about everybody else. I get it. But that doesn't mean that you don't care about everybody else, because they are part of the reason why you are where you are. And they are going to be a big part of the reason of why you get farther than you are right now. It doesn't matter how smart your AI is or how advanced your robot is, it will never replace a human being. Never. And the future is more bright and robust and resilient when you have many people that are able to come together. The problem isn't to try to force everybody to conform, and it's not a problem of trying to force everybody into confinement or to controls. It's about finding a way to establish consensus among everybody. Everybody understands the point of the exercise. We have a shared common purpose. We know why we're here. We know what we're working towards. And we're doing it together. And it's something that the deviant echelon can be brought back down, and just be the upper echelon of society. And for that height to be, as high as you want to go, guys. But in order for that to work in a sustainable way, we have to moderate, how we do things to make sure that we are shoring up the lowest rung of a criterion echelon of society, which essentially says this is the baseline standard of a good life, and everybody deserves to live that. And they'll live it in varying degrees and varying ways, because good life is going to be different for everyone. But we need to have a threshold at the end of that says that we need to make sure that nobody falls behind this point, because that is determining how high we're going to be able to go in terms of our exceeding boundaries and, expanding our horizons. And when you think of it in terms of we're all in this together, and as far as you want to go is a matter of how far we can take each other, and you think of the fact that everybody understands the point of the exercise, we all have the shared common purpose, then we can direct ourselves to accomplish things together and not using force or demand, but rather a welcoming invite of, what do you have to offer? I don't think that the solution to governance of diverse society is, a socialistic hand out or a communistic or a socialistic hand up and a communistic hand out, or an impossible capitalistic chance at a big break, which is where we're at right now. It's opportunity of a fair shake. It says we need you at your best. You got something to bring to the world. We want you to show up show out, bring your talents, give it your good work and service, and in return you'll get fair compensation. And not just fair compensation, but also a society that supports you to become your best, because we need you at your best. And in order for you to be at your best, you need to have a safe home space to be able to cultivate yourself. You need to have a safe community space in order to be able to venture out and start creating, positive human relations so that you can further develop and then, benefit from those relationship ties. And then a safe environment space in terms of your cities that you live in or your towns, so you can foster good neighborly relations with one another. And so we look at each other as being a part of this collective with a common interest to have, cities that are livable and habitable and beautiful and stable and secure. And everybody knows that there's opportunity for them to succeed, and they literally just have to apply themselves, in strive, take risks for higher things, and society has them supported in a situation in which they can thrive in. It's possible to make a society like that, and I find it laughable, in fact. You hear many of these people in the upper echelons of society fancying that we're going to have some sort of, off-planet development of sustainable cities off-planet. Those things are not going to be possible. It's not like you can just, we have a clean slate, and so we can just build it up the way we want to, and then the people will just have to live in accordance to the way we build it, and they're going to change their attitudes and their habits to conform to that, because if they don't, they get cut off of life support. And as if that's going to change the fundamental underpinning aspects of humanity. And this just doesn't work that way. What is required is to, put at the core of all of our decision making the human element, the consideration of, the one smallest continuum factor, which is the human element, and really think in a holistic way about people and meet them where they are, and help them to understand that there is more to life than where they are. Give them the means to understand that there is a way to move beyond that. Give them a reasonable incentive to move into that direction. And then allow them to conform themselves on their own terms and conditions, using their free will to adopt new ways of living that is conducive to their well-being. And for them to model what the good life is for themselves, given many different choices of different things they can do and pursue, knowing that all they have to do is just abide by the basic conformities of civil society and start reinforcing that, with positive and negative sanctioning, opportunities for them to live into these opportunities in which they can gain advantage. And over time, evolve people out of these shitty, limited situations in which people are suffering and living in poverty and, reducing themselves to, their worst versions because they're left to their own devices, in a dog-eat-dog world. That's the way they're going to trend to be, because that's what seems as normal. You're moving them out and beyond that and letting them see the potential of becoming something so much more, and you're guiding them in that direction with intent that, you're not trying to force them or conform them or shape them or control them. Just show them that there is a better way. It's like being a role model to them, to show, giving them the guidance. There's a better way. And if you work together in a sense of we're trying to create this world together that works for everybody, and we're all putting our good ideas towards accomplishing that same, general good outcomes, while it might start off slow in terms of like how this can get going, it will gain momentum over time as people start to see like, well, this actually does work. This actually is a good thing. It works out well for me. And so people will start taking on the risks for higher things. They'll apply themselves with intention. You know, work won't be just this drudgery or some sense of like you have to have a lifelong career of doing something you absolutely hate in order to earn a buck so you can make a living. Like, you'll actually be able to apply yourself towards something that you're really good at and you're very talented at. And because you offer that, it helps us to accomplish the grander objective as a collective. You know, you are part of the purpose. We need you here. And you get a benefit out of that. And you grow as a person and you apply yourself and you do it with this sense of the thing that, you know, many people in the upper echelon, the deviant echelon don't consider right now, which is the sense of like work gives so much value to people. You know, it's a sense of applying yourself and it's a sense of doing the good, hard, and necessary work. It's giving your talents in service to the betterment of the world. Like, people need that sensibility within them, that they've accomplished something good, you know, towards an outcome that is, you know, going to make a difference. They like that sensibility. They know that they have been helpful. And it's a good feeling. It's something that humans crave. And so what I'm offering is this sensibility of like, the world isn't working for everybody right now because, you know, the people who are in positions of power have not sorted out their priorities to consider all parties involved. You know, they're not really worried about what happens to you. They don't think of you. But what I'm saying is, you know, I'm a person that thinks of everyone and everything. And I know how to administrate. Because I understand what it takes to get something done. I understand the parts and the pieces and the work that it takes to get it done. And what I'm suggesting in terms of an offering to the world of eudaimonian stewardship is essentially this philosophy that we can work together to kind of accrue the interest for the common good. And do so without, you know, taking on this, you know, enemy factioning type relationship with people that are in the deviant echelon. We need to bring them back down to reality that we have to all be in this together. We will go so much farther and accomplish so many more incredible things if we all do it together. And then the lower echelon of society like really needs to understand that you have to put in some very intentional work to the benefit of us developing out these things, you know? And it's the sense that we have to both individually and collectively assume the responsibility of stewarding our lives, stewarding our homes, stewarding our neighborhoods and communities, our cities, our states, our whole nation, and the whole world, including our planet. And when we take on a sense of like we're being stewards, we're helping to take on the responsibility of managing these things that are needing the might of great care, and we give attention and care to it to accomplish it. And our work has to begin in a sense of, you know, we have to take on responsibilities, each one of us. We all have, there's work to do, and we all have a job. You know, it's going to take all hands on deck to accomplish it. And that we are working towards being, you know, in relation with one another in terms of being co-creators of, you know, the future that is to come. And wanting that future to be good and making sure nobody gets left behind, you know, but also that nobody gets kept behind. You know, I emphasize that in my statement of like how I want to see the world is because, again, I'm thinking of, you know, the deviant echelon. I want to bring them into the upper echelon And I don't want to keep them behind, but keep them behind so they can't advance. But we need to make sure that nobody in the lower echelon of society gets kept behind in the process. So it's having a consideration of like, we all go together or we don't go anywhere at all. And that's kind of where we're at right now. When you think of like, where are America's resources going towards right now? To blow up other nations for no reason other than to like destabilize the world and make everybody in a more precarious situation, make everything more expensive and definitely more dangerous. That's not an outcome we actually would want. And America is being taken away from good work of like focusing on administrating here at home to make things better. And so, where we could be making advances to help create, more opportunities for the upper echelon to do their thing, they're being stifled because of this. The few people that are, in the realms of making money off of conflict and the war machine, they're doing great, That's for them. But that's not everybody. And people in the lower echelons of society are suffering. And right now we don't have a criterion echelon of society. What was once deemed the middle class just doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't. And the criterion echelon is like where everybody belongs to live the good life. And so we shouldn't have poverty. We shouldn't have people that are, living in squalor, and we shouldn't have people that are living without the means just to attain life vital resources. And, like, we should have a criterion echelon that says, like, this is the secure standard situation in America. Everybody lives the good life, and that the upper echelon of society don't have to worry about the rest of us because we're getting along just fine. We're at that standard. Everything's good for us, right? And everything's good for you too. But we're not working in opposition with one another, and we're not working outside of everybody's best interests. They can do their thing, but there's limits to that. And there's, certain things you're not allowed to do because it goes against the collective best interest. And the same goes for people in, the lower echelon. It's like, do what you got to do, live the good life. But you have to conform to the sensibilities of, what is just, fair, reasonable, right in a civil society. And you have to be involved. You have to participate. You have to contribute. Nobody gets free rides in this scenario universe. But I argue if we do this right, which we can, nobody would want to. People would intentionally want to involve themselves in this type of world because of, like, the amazing experience that it can and will be, knowing that we have to have a common purpose and we have to accrue our, efforts towards a common good. And we have to work towards establishing, a firm sensibility, grounded in this ideal, scenario universe in which, we are making fundamental changes to society. We are making, consequential, immutable, making consequential decisions off of immutable principles. We are taking on initiatives that are well-rounded in scope. We understand what it takes in order for us to accomplish what we're trying to do is going to require it be integrity bound. And that we strive for, here in America, for our sphere of influence to go out omnidirectionally. We want to have, the capacity to affect change in many different ways. Because we do need to kind of set the standard for what the rest of the world is going to fall in line with, because they're going to see that we are the model standard of the best practices, and they will naturally align with us because they see that we're doing it right. And that if they lean into the processes that we're adopting and adapting to, that they could have the positive types of results for their people and their populations as well. And when we start living out in an experience where other nations are becoming resonant with what we are representing, then we have a more secure situation. We're all operating off of the same tone, the same sensibilities, the same frequency. We're aligning and attuning with a continuum of the development and advancement of civilization. You know? And nations have always tried to do this. But I argue we don't need to do it by, forcefully overthrowing other countries, or going to war with them, short of needing to establish peace. But you certainly are not establishing peace if you're, blowing up another country while you're impoverishing your current country, your own country, which is what's happening with the current presidential administration, POTUS 47. And so the idea is to really model the framework for an ever more healthy, sustainable, resilient, stable, just and peaceful society, and to help to build out the innovations and the educations and the infrastructures and the integral structures and the, sociological frameworks and the economic, systems and the political policy frameworks that helps to create space for this to be built out by every single person's involvement and participation and contribution. And we will be working together to set that standard, to set that tone, to all of us vibing on the same frequency. This is what we're about and this is what we're doing. And as we become more coherent in our nation, we will resonate with other nations as they see this is the best practice. And they will start adopting those good references. They'll conform them to their own identities in their own special ways, but there will be a continuity, a continuum factor in it that reflects that sense that, we're making the world work for everyone without the disadvantage of anyone, so nobody gets left behind or kept behind and everyone lives the good life. And in this scenario universe, you'll have less people that want to get in positions of power, or less people that are able to get in positions of power, who are all about, factioning us or keeping us separate or keeping us distracted by hate or intolerance or violence and these sorts of things. Because we recognize that taking on that type of worthless, argument about, petty things that really don't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. Let those things go aside and really focus on the task at hand of what is most important, what actually truly matters. It's not those petty infighting things, save that for, arguments over the dinner table or, something to the effect, or debates on the streets. That's fine. But don't let that stand in the way from us working together to get the things done that we need in order to make sure that everybody is faring well in their lives. And the leaders that are trying to force people or manipulate people or deceive people or convince people that we have to attack one another, go after one another in order for society to function or whatever, they're leading us away from the capacity to become coherent. And so in a scenario universe where we're working out, we're trying to make this work for everybody. We're figuring that out together. You'll have less traction as a political candidate if your whole shtick, your whole spiel is about hate them, hurt those, take from those, deny those, reject those, attack those. We don't have time for that. When you look at the grand scheme of things, America's supposed to be, preamble promise is basically the whole point of the exercise. What does policy do in government? Why does government exist? What next needs to be done to make sure that we're, promoting the general welfare, securing blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, providing for the common defense. If that's our job, form our more perfect union, establish justice, ensure our domestic tranquility, provide for our common defense, promote our general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Keynote, ourselves and our posterity. We're not supposed to just do things like for future generations to benefit from. We have to do things that we benefit from now, that makes life worth living now, so that in the future, our future generations are going to be building off of the momentum of this sense that, like, man, this is the good life and we're living it, And we're not, instead of like passing on to them the problems or our burdens or our debts, we're passing them on this sense of purpose and place and belonging and participation and contribution to a worthwhile, worthy goal. And to focus on taking risks for higher things and being our better selves than to focus on infighting with one another over petty things that in the grand scheme make no difference. And we elect people who are, propagators of violence and cruelty. We don't vote for those sorts of people because they don't really have a place of belonging in the halls of decision making or positions of authority, because they're focused on finding a way to wedge divisiveness amongst us. And that is an exhaustive process, and it totally detracts from like the value adding process of management and development and progress, And so once we start realizing like we have something that we're working towards together, we'll vote those type of people out. And as they aren't in positions of decision-making or authority, and the people who are in decision-making roles and authority positions, they are helping to make decisions on our behalf, our collective behalf. They're representing us in terms of what they understand is the point of the exercise. And they're translating what we're telling them, this is what we need to do next. And they understand in the aggregate of all things, this is obviously what needs to be done next, not just based off of what people say, but also what we can see in terms of where the next thing needs to be done in order for us to achieve the right type of progress based off of where we are now and where we're trying to get next, and they think of that in terms of like being an innovator, having an engineer's mind. We should be electing people who are really orienting themselves towards becoming outcome engineers, which is what a eudaimonian is, or what a welfaring steward is. You're outcome engineers. You're engineering for outcomes that are positive, that are going to move us in the direction we want to go. And, they involve themselves in this whole systems design, which I love systems. I love things that do things. And in this systems design, we're essentially trying to establish this paradigm of eudaimonia, where everybody lives in a sense of like, completeness, and they feel that they are the living embodiment of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and we work in, the ways that we can to actualize to the fullest potential every opportunity that is available to us that has the potential to be on a continuum, to grow, to continue to progress, to not be like a dead end that wastes our time, effort, and energy, that leads to the outcomes that we would want to have accomplished for ourselves, that works in mutual interest for everybody. Mutual benefits, mutual securities, with mutual respects. And in the sense, eudaimonia means to be well, and to be well is to be able to center yourself in the life ways of a good life. And having this sense of, we can approach this, especially when we're coming at it from like a holistic whole systems approach. how I'm seeing it, as I've said, my responsibility is to make sure that I get everybody on board and build consensus in terms of what we're working towards together. Works for everybody, not disadvantaging anybody, nobody's getting left behind. There's that sweet spot, that perfect equilibrium that we have to get at with one another, and that has to be fostered, that has to be managed, and has to be maintained. And that's what the work of, a leader of such a movement, has to take upon themselves in terms of responsibility. You have to administer to that sensibility of what you are stewarding for the sensibilities of everybody to be involved with. And so it's going to take this approach of establishing a proper capitalism that has a proper intended use, not just making money, but making a difference in the world towards good outcomes. And you need to take, public policies, and they need to move out omnidirectionally in terms of it doesn't have to be big world-changing policies, but policies that are small changes in the right way at the right time for the right reasons can have a profound shift in the way that cities and people relate with one another and organize with one another, and that can have a profound difference in terms of outcomes of productivity in society. And the difference in the productivity in society makes a tremendous difference in terms of where we stand in our financial viability as an entire nation, which makes a big difference in terms of where we stand of our taxes actually being able to go towards something that works for our benefit today, not just paying interest on, a loan that we had to take out before to pay for a bunch of things that didn't really pan out towards anything that's beneficial right now. You know what I'm saying? And taking on the sense of we want to work towards the public good, but the public good isn't necessarily talking about moralization of everybody. It's more like understanding there's ethical bounds and guidelines, there's laws, there's rules, there's norms. Culture shifts and it helps to inform policy, and people can help to mold and shape what society looks like. But we shouldn't be making rules and laws that take away the personhood of an individual, take away their rights and their ability to self-determine, and so we should have laws that help to affirm the personal dominion of everyone and gives an insulary protection so that the government can't come and impose itself upon you. And we're worrying less about these types of social laws and rules, trying to get people to, be moralistic in this way or that way. Instead, it's just you understand that you are a, self-sovereign, fully independent, autonomous, self-governed, independent person, but you are amongst many other people that are equally as independent. And the whole point is to live out your life experience and live the good life, but don't do so while imposing yourself or infringing upon somebody else's, personal dominion. And as long as you can respect that about everybody else, you reconfirm that for yourself, and it's self-possession, and you're your own property and you're protecting your own personal property. And because you respect that about other people, it increases the likelihood they're going to respect that about you. It's kind of like the golden rule and the platinum rule meets each other in this perfect synthesis. Do unto others as you would have them do to you, and treat other people as they want to be treated. In essence, that's enough in order for us to get along in society. But it takes a lot of work to reinforce that, cultivate that, remind people, grow people in that experience of knowing the difference between right and wrong. It's not all right to harm other people, And so that's why it's important that culture helps to teach us, the sensibilities of right or wrong. But again, laws and rules should be about ethical guidelines and boundaries, not about trying to moralize the world into some conformity of a certain type of religion or something like that. It's one of the most beautiful, important, and valuable aspects of the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America. Free religion. You are free to, if you so choose to, have faith and belief and to be a practitioner of a particular, religion, or to not have any religion at all. That's your domain. That's not for anybody else to come in and tell you what to do, what to think, to what to feel. Can people inspire you and, try to influence you and to convince you of things? Sure. Culturally, absolutely. That's how we learn from each other. You can't force somebody to conform it, and you can't make a law that says you have to live this religion, or else. This is not a theocracy. We are a democracy. We are a democratic republic. And there's no space for taking away somebody's personal right to choose, their own way of life towards happiness. And so our laws should not be about, conforming people to something that is, outside of what is the best interest for their own, sensibilities. But we need to have also laws that help to make sure that we're not stepping on each other's toes or infringing upon people's, personal lives, and not hurting or harming and not allowing for exploitations. Laws are essentially they don't necessarily stop people who are already, going to be deviants. It just prevents, those people who are sensitive to, and have a sensibility of what's right and wrong, and reserves them to say, actually, society doesn't allow me to do that. And it stops them in their tracks before they do the wrong thing. It's a conscience that they hear. For those who are deviants and are going to, break the laws or the rules anyway, the law is there to help to rein them back in to conform with what is polite, civil, law-abiding society. And that needs to happen, and it needs to be done in such a way where people can't just get out of trouble. There has to be consequences for those actions, corrective mechanisms, to help them to restore themselves back into integrities, back into society, And we need to create laws and rules that help to allow for that, because we have to have some sensibility of guiding people in alignment with staying on this continuum of, what is just, what is fair, what is reasonable, what is right, for themselves and for everyone else, and live in civil society. This is a part of administration. And that sensibility doesn't come by somebody telling you, standing next to you all the time, telling you, don't do that, do this sort of thing. It's something that we learn from each other. We learn from society. We learn through our experiences of how to be a good person and live, as a good citizen in civil society. We have to teach that to one another, and we do that through our social ontology, the way that we live and the way that we communicate with one another and interact with one another. That's why I think it's really important for us to have a common cohesive narrative to tell one another, because without that, people and their sordid interests, and, it's an attention economy, and everybody's trying to pull you here and pull you there and listen to this and think about that, and they're trying to lead you astray from this sensibility of as if you don't know yourself right from wrong, and that you have to always defer to them, that they're the ones that have the answer, and they impress themselves upon you, and they impose their impressions upon you to make you think that the world is a certain way that it's not. And so when left to your own devices without their, rules of this is the way it's supposed to be, you don't know what is right or what is wrong. And so you start mimicking them or behaving like them, and it doesn't necessarily, you're supposed to find good role models, people that you would want to be like, and emulate them, and learn and find what works best for your own personality and characteristics, adopt the good characteristics, let go of the things that don't work for you. But you're not supposed to fall in line with those people who are mean and cruel and violent and do what they say and think that that's, conducive to your own well-being, because while it might work for them, it doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. And especially if you're turning on certain populations of people, maybe, discrimination is a taught thing, racism is a taught thing, misogyny is a taught thing. These are things that you were taught by individuals. Somehow in your life learning, you assimilated the models and the frameworks that it was okay to do those things. and it's not. And so society is, in this dysfunctional state because everybody's just going off in their own direction. They think it's perfectly fine to, well, that person gets away with it. I mean, the current POTUS 47 is a terrible role model for anybody. And, he is from the highest position and the most powerful role currently in the world paradigm is, led by somebody that is not of sound mind or character, and you would not want to see that person in any position of authority, over anyone. You wouldn't trust this person to make decisions on your behalf that are your best interest. If showing his behavior towards women and his behavior towards people of color and his behavior towards people that are, not of a certain particular religion or a certain economic, bracket, left to his own devices to make decisions on behalf of people that, aren't a part of his own little, insulated pockets of thriving. His solution for those people is to leave it to them to suffer. It's not my problem. If you're going to criticize me or you don't like me taking us to war, you're a fool. Gas prices are going down, food prices are going down, my tariffs are fine. Telling you that, lying to you and then punishing you for not, conforming and believing those lies, even though they're hurting you. And that those lies and those deception is sending a signal to everybody that lies and deception is just the way that we do things now. And so you're seeing this whole denigration and devolvement of civil society because the person who's supposed to be, one of the most key role models of people all across the world is out of his freaking mind, and he's scary. And then you think about the people around him quite literally taking advantage of his vulnerable state of, being senile. And we're in this really precarious situation because people are looking at that and saying, well, if he can get away with it. And I'm really quite proud of a lot of people that I had never thought that I would ever say that I'd be proud of before. People I literally in my head said, wow, I could never, I prayed and I prayed for these people to find a way to come back into their senses, and they did. And it was just a miracle. But I wish it could have happened sooner, where they realized how really dangerous that POTUS 47 is. And their support for him was misguided because they misplaced trust in an untrustworthy person. And now that person, has taken the power that has been entrusted in them, and they're doing great harm to lots of people and doing things that, he promised he never would do. And it's harming these people who trusted him, and watching them go through the grieving process of losing this sense of the world is safe, and to watching them break it down in terms of trying to make sense. They're literally going through the grieving process. We all are. But I'm so proud of them for everybody has their own personal day of revelation and happens in their own good time. And to see them coming into it, not saying that they're going to awaken to the reality that all the other things that they've gotten wrong, or their faulty beliefs and their false narratives that they, have rigged as the thing that they base their reputation on. They may not wake up into that entirely, but there is hope that they can realize that, there has to be something, that we can all trust in, that is not about deception and cruelty and violence, because there is an ultimate price that we all have to pay for it, And in the end, when you are questioning, like, how did things get so bad? It's like, well, this is what happens when you place trust in a bad actor with nefarious intent, who doesn't have your best interest at heart, who doesn't think about you, doesn't care about you. What did you expect? That because you pledged your allegiance and fidelity to this person and you went all in with them and you championed for them and you helped them to get elected, that they were going to like be there for you, your one true solid, you would always be able to count on them to do the right thing? When did this person ever do the right thing? Do right by you and others, Realistically. And, I think that's going to be a whole process for them to go through, but I'm really proud. I'm literally grateful for the personal day of revelation that they had that helped them to wake up into, this mistake that they made in misplacing trust. And I hope from that experience it will continue on in that process of, grieving the loss of, the false paradigm they were in, accepting that they were led astray. And hopefully they will be more open and receptive to embracing something new and something different, that isn't based off of, the things that they had aligned with before or believed in before. Like right now is an opportunity to reach out to those sort of people and being like, like, bless you for coming to your senses, because we all have to like shake off that old world paradigm right now, because it's a dying world, and the people who are like trying to stay on that, wavelength are just going to suffer more and more. And we really need everybody to come to a conscious sense that we have to work on this together to change things, and we need them too, In my work, I think of them too. I think of everybody and everything, and not in a sense of like I know everything. This is confidence, not cockiness. I don't confuse the two. I just know who I am, and I know what I'm here for, and I know what I'm about, and I know what I want to achieve, and I know where I want to go. And I just want to bring everybody with me because it's a great place. A place of belonging for everybody that leaves nobody behind, And if at the, most what I'm asking for is for you to let go of this, old paradigm that you lived in before that maybe had a lot of meaning to you. Really gave you a sense of purpose and place and belonging, and I'm all about this movement. I'm going to stand behind this person because I believe they're leading the charge in a direction I want to go, and now you've been let down by that person, and they're not leading you to somewhere where you would actually want to go, and you're hurting because of that, and your feeling systems are failed. Well, that's because the leadership who are running those systems are allowing them to fail. They're neglecting those systems. They're mismanaging them. And it doesn't mean that you throw out everything. You just recognize that how things are working right now are the direct result of the decisions, past and prior decision making that we have done. That we're living out in the scenario universe. It was the inevitability was to come from the past, and now we need to live in the present, in the sense that, if our decisions back then determined our fate that we're living in right now, then our decisions right now can determine our fate where we're going to be in the future. And what I'm offering is something that we can choose to do together that is going to lead us in a better direction than where we are now. And helps to restore integrities. Helps to get us out of this mess that we've been brought into. Helps to set a trajectory that leads us somewhere where we would actually want to go. And then invites everybody into that situation. And does so in such a way of like, I am not here to, like punish you for past and prior decision making, because everybody makes mistakes. And America is a great experiment. We're trying to figure it out together. And we tried something totally new, totally different, right? Didn't really work out so great, And it's failing spectacularly every single day, and it's not laughing at it like this is funny, because, death and destruction and suffering and, dismantling of institutions and organizations, these aren't good things, but when you look at it in the context of like everything that has been done can be undone, we'll never go back to what we were before. It's kind of like, once you've changed the shape of something, you're never going to be able to like get it back to where it was before. But golden door of opportunity, why would we ever want to go back to that? It didn't work for everybody. We have a chance now to make it work for everybody. And I say let's lean in with enthusiasm towards something that really could be much different. You wanted America to be great. I suggest that America can't be great if it fails to do good. So let's first get the good down, and then the great will come naturally. The great is not a thing that we strive for and we do it and this is what greatness looks like. No. We do good and we do right, and we do it consistently and we do it together. And then what makes America great will be a living answer. We will be living what makes America great through our experience of doing good things, And everything that is falling apart and led into disarray, and our poor, nation being discredited and losing face and becoming, the enemy of the world instead of, some sort of inspiration, which is what we used to be. Like going to America was like going to heaven at one point in time. And now we're looking like this, failed experiments, what we look like. And it doesn't have to be that way. I suggest we can make it through, this final term of POTUS 47. We can make it through because we can determine for ourselves that we're going to make it through. We are not going to lose this to this person. We are going to, in every front, push back. We're going to save and we're going to secure. We're going to change hearts and minds. We're going to align ourselves with a collective best interest and start telling ourselves the same common story of like, we deserve better than, what we've gotten so far. And it's going to take a lot of work to get us to where we want to go, but by hell, where we want to be is somewhere that's much better than where we are right now. We envision something so much greater. It's the, doggerel sum up of a quote that one of my favorite people said is essentially like, we need to live up to the America of our highest ideals and live up to, what our founding fathers envisioned for us. If we say that, America is this place of, such pride and prestige and like, I'm proud to be an American, these sorts of things. We really need to embody that. We need to live it. We need to be it. We need to do it. But we also need to recognize, we're not trying to catch up with anybody else except for our founding fathers who saw for us this potential of becoming, so much more than what we were then. And that if we just follow some basic guidelines and rules and standards and norms and protocols and decorum and the sensibility of right and wrong and to live out virtuously with intention, like we could do incredible things. Man, that far beats, living under some sort of like forced tyranny of like your life amounts to nothing more than you're the property and possession of your government, and they're going to dictate to you what to do, what to think, and what to feel. That's what America said in his Declaration of Independence, what we will not stand for. And our Constitution gave us the means by which to approach a way of governance that prevents us from ever receding back into something so in our opinion, at the founding as a nation was very uncivilized. We're trying to evolve as a civilization, evolve as a people. And our framework of our Constitution gave us the means by which we can achieve that. We need to take it another step by really cultivating an American identity that everybody can relate to. Make America Great was an attempt at that, but it was a failed attempt, because you see the people who got into the positions of power and start saying this is what's great wasn't so great for people. It literally was disadvantaging people, leaving people by the side of the road, creating otherisms, discriminations, violence, cruelty, inhumanity, corruption, lots of all the worst things you can think of, all compiled into the only way to make America great is by lowering its standards of civility and not following the rule of law, being deeply corrupt, and none of those things were great. But we need to choose an identity that can work similar to that. It's something that you can see yourself being a part of. You can see yourself involving with. You can see yourself, relating to. And when you talk with your fellow American and fellow, good people of the world, and you talk about, I'm an American, and what that means is, and be able to have an answer for that. The American identity stands for, and it's not just some sort of cultural reference of MAGA. It's a sensibility, is I know my purpose. I know my place of belonging. And I'm damn proud to be an American. Like the song goes, where at least I know I'm free. And this sensibility of knowing that we're all on the same page about where we're going. Being American means that we are helping to make sure America works for everyone without the disadvantage of anyone, so nobody gets left behind or kept behind, everybody lives the good life. How we achieve that is through mutualisms. We have mutual respect, mutual interests, mutual benefits, mutual securities. We're making sure that America is malleable, adaptable, mobile, efficient, and is doing the sufficient work of managing, because we're stewarding our nation, and we're stewarding our people to make sure everybody's faring well in their lives. Because our ultimate goal is to make sure that we achieve eudaimonia. And in the terms and conditions of America's founding principles, that is embodied in achieving and upholding and maintaining, in perpetuity along a continuum of progress, the preamble promise: we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. And all of that is making sure that we are the living answer to what does it mean to have life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. What does it mean to be endowed by our Creator with that inalienable right? This is what it means. Let me show you how. And for your life to be a living testament to the success that is America. And for that to be, resonant for everybody. It's not going to look the same for everybody, because everybody has their varied and different experiences. But everybody knows in their own sense, in their head and in their hearts, I'm living the good life. And we should be working towards making that happen. And I suggest that our policies should be informed to help to achieve that and make that happen. If a policy is created without the fundamental frameworks of the preamble promise embedded into it, then it's not for us. And we should be creating initiatives that we challenge ourselves to take on and to assume and to accomplish that help us to achieve good outcomes of welfaring stewardship to secure, the eudaimonian experience for everyone. Everyone's living the good life. Making our cities more, habitable, livable, safe, sound, beautiful. Helping to make sure that our education system, which is sorely, lacking in its capacity to help us to actualize our best version, a wholly inefficient system, not conducive to well-being. It's supposed to be a great equalizer in society. Reimagine and rebuild that in terms of like help to secure lifelong learners forever in America. You come here and learning is what we're all about, and finding ways to take what we learn and apply it practically to achieve the outcomes that we're working towards together collectively, and empowering people through entrepreneurship. So we don't have to worry about the, worst case scenario of autonomy takes away all the jobs to work for large corporations. Okay. If we're going to trend towards that, then we need to bolster and reinforce an auxiliary economics that helps us to build up, and, across the board, everybody turns into entrepreneurs and they are empowered in that position to participate and contribute to the development of society, because it's going to take a whole lot more than just robots to get everything done and make sure everybody is cared for, and cared about, and to make sure everybody realizes they have a purpose and they have a place and they have to participate and they have to contribute. I mean, if we do this right, literally, work weeks could be 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. And you would make enough doing that that's a living wage. And then you have enough, compensation for everybody in America to have this robust support system to make sure that you have life vital essentials and your needs are met, and it's not a hand up or a handout. It's saying that, like, by supporting you are empowered to do what's necessary in order for us to keep it all running. And your contribution is feeding into this system being able to support you just as much as it is towards creating, efficiencies in the systems and creating abundance and creating, surplus in terms of the value that you're creating that allows us to take that value and build upon it for more efficiencies and systems down the line. We need to have a might of great care package. That's what I like to call it. And it's essentially just giving everybody options of like, what sort of support and care do you need in order for you to level up your own life, to secure the good life for yourself, but also have the chance to take risks for higher things, become a prospect in society to, level yourself up beyond just the good life. Man, you're living the lap of luxury, and strive for that. I want you to. But again, we have to do it in such a way where we're at least comfortably, conservatively considerate of the fact that everybody has to live the good life. Nobody's getting left behind. But empower people through a might of great care packages. Like, do you have children and you need to have childcare? Okay, that can be one of your options. Do you need, robust health care more than just the basic health care? Okay, that can be one of your options. Do you need supports to be able to help to do the upstart for your own business, or to invest in creating this, the prototype for this invention that you've come up with? Like, okay, that can be a part of it too. Do you just need to have, a micro loan that helps you to, pay for your cost of living to make sure everything's paid on time, and then you just work to, replenish that line of credit for yourselves? Like, okay, that gives you stability in your life, doesn't it? Do you want to be able to afford to get renewable energy for your house? Like, okay, that could be one of the things you go for too. But we'll make these options for everybody to choose their own catalog of benefits that serve them in their own way, and allow them to opt in for that, and to make that accessible to everybody, because not everybody wants or needs the same thing. So you can't do cookie cutter portions for everyone, and because you can't serve everybody in that way, it's impossible to do that. But you can serve everyone in different ways, and to support a system like that, you have to have a tax system that supports that isn't based off of what it is now, where, like, you tax the poor in order to save money for the rich. Like, that's not functional. But, this is possible to be funded through creating a stewardship tax that everybody pays, every person in society has to pay. Nobody gets out of it. And it's a stewardship tax, an invariable tax for everybody to pay into stewardship programs. And then to make sure that we can have, efficiencies and robustness in it, anybody that lives in the upper echelon of society, they could pool on the Might of Great Care resources if they wanted to, but at a very high penalty in terms of a variable tax that they end up having to pay in the end. And so, like, maybe they do want to opt in to have, like, maybe our healthcare is just so great that they really want to have that opposed to their own private, whatever. They would have to take a higher penalty in terms of an equilibrium tax that makes sure that, they're paying more, or in their stewardship tax, they're paying more to have access to this type of resource because they technically don't really need it. This is about securing the criterion echelon of society so they can live the good life, and it's available to everybody. Everybody has to pay into it, but you really should only be pooling from this if you really actually need it, and if you are able to, live beyond, a prospect echelon of society, which is rungs ahead of, a criterion echelon, you probably don't need it, and so you pulling on it is taking away from other people having it unless you're putting more money into it, essentially. Despite the fact that you still have to pay the standard tax. And the reason why you do this is because it's just, it's fair, it's reasonable, it's right. It makes common sense. It makes sure that you don't have to worry about coming up with some business schema to solve, a public concern issue, privatizing everything is not the solution to everything, and it takes away the incentives of making sure just people have what they need. The service is providing for the people what they need if you turn it into a private industry thing, because it turns it into for-profit. So avoiding that, and then having an equilibrium tax to make sure that, people don't get too far ahead, that it leaves people behind. It helps to make sure we're in that, sweet spot, that safe space, that happy equilibrium with one another so that we can all thrive together, and having a portions tax, which is essentially saying, like, if you don't want to have to pay, an exceeding tax with equilibrium that, like, draws down, you're making more than what is deemed cohesive to collective society, you can draw down on what you would have to pay in equilibrium tax by paying more into a portions tax, which pays for the initiatives that we need to get done through, welfare and stewardship initiatives that say we're accomplishing this to help to, improve cities in the City of Cities framework, which is essentially just a way to make sure all the cities, have a standard of living and quality in them. You can invest into those. You can invest into other types of programs that we have opted into together as a collective, as these are, our initiatives we're working towards. And you can pay into that in portions to draw down your tax, but at least then you get to be selective about it. Like, this is what's important to me. Let's get that done. Or if you do this, it actually is going to benefit my company down the line. So yeah, I would definitely like to help you to help yourself, because it eventually will help me. And it puts agency in our tax system. We need to tax. We have to be able to pay for all of this stuff somehow, but do so in such a way where it's not, thinking that you're supposed to live and then die, pay your taxes in between, and not a lot of it, like, comes about in terms of, like, good outcomes. Where's your return on investment for your taxes? If it's up to POTUS 47, it's so they can blow it in a hot second, blowing people up in some foreign land, when instead it should be invested here in America to help to, enhance the quality of life here, improve the American situation, make things more stable for everyone, so we can all get along and we don't have to worry about each other anymore. Like, everybody's just doing fine. Like, we're good, and we can see crime rates go down because people become more, civil with one another, they're more stable in their lives. They don't have to, be led to and left in their own devices do the wrong thing, because, like, they literally want to be a part of this situation because it's good for them. It's good for them, it's good for you, it's good for everybody, That's the type of, like, orientation we really need to start leaning in towards. I think that America, has to take on this sense of intentionally designing a paradigm and living within it and living out of it and living it out loud, being a part of that process, really embed this sense of, we have to trust each other, we have to respect each other, we have to, have a mutual ethical bounds that we adhere to, and securities and, respects for our mutual interest in property and personal dominions and these sorts of things, which requires law in order to keep everything in accordance, to make sure we don't step out of lines. And if we are, there's a way to correct people back into it, and then to, redeem the time and to, pay recompense when necessary. That way we can work independently and collectively to make sure that we're all aligning and attuning with a sensibility of like, if America is disadvantaging anyone in some way, eventually, you may not see it now, but eventually it's going to come back and it's going to harm you too. You can take that as a perfect example with the whole MAGA movement thing. Like, POTUS 47 said, I'm going to take us and we're going to be great, and it's going to take all of this bad stuff doing to other people in order for us to be great. And now all that bad stuff doing to other people has translated into bad stuff towards everybody, and you are on the shit end of that stick now too. And how does it feel to feel neglected and abandoned and abused and disregarded and discarded? To realize that all of that sense that you were cared for and cared about was a lie, and that it wasn't about you or improving your life or situation. It was literally about, getting you in the con of believing that this person can be trusted, and then once they get in position of power, there's nothing you can do to stop them. And that's where we're at. And it's a shitty situation for everybody. But it doesn't have to continue to be that way. I argue that yes, it's going to take us electing a lot of people that are willing to keep open to the possibilities, see the potential in where we can go from here, recognizing that not all hope is lost. And if we do align ourselves with a sense of like, whether you are, Republican or you're Democrat or you're independent, whether it doesn't matter what party you're in, we all have to be the responsible party to take care of business and get things back on track. Make the American situation a place, worth defending, first of all, but also a place in which everybody can thrive. I don't want anybody to suffer from the consequences of terrible decision making on the behalf of decision makers who weren't thinking of like the consequences of their actions. We need to elect people that are open to the possibilities, that can see potential in that America can be, restored in integrities, can move in a new direction going forward, away from this shitty past and in something way greater than what we've ever been before. But moving in a direction intentionally that we can see the outline of where we want to go and actually get ourselves to arrive there, And so at that point in time, we can take risks for higher things and say, like, we were able to secure this situation for ourselves. And now that we're here, we're able to move forward in a much more, robust and resilient and fortified position. And now we can foster an even greater future moving forward and set ourselves up for success leading in that direction and do it all together, because, it's not, every person out for themselves. It's like, we're all in this together. If America falls, where are you gonna go? What's gonna happen to you? And I know there's lots of people that are trying to like hunker down with a bunch of guns and, stockpiles of food because they think that the world's going to end or something like that. I've known quite a few people who've fallen into that trap. I've always sought this sensibility of like, I don't want to like corner myself off somewhere. Like, I want to make sure that nobody gets left behind. If the world's going to shit, I want to stop it from going that direction. Let's pivot, man. Let's diverge from that continuum. How can we do something that makes sure nobody gets left behind? I don't want to think of a world where people are suffering or people are harmed or people are left for dead, because of lack of caring, because we can do the right thing. There are things that we can do to set things right, and there are good people in the world with good hearts and good heads and are willing to do the hard and necessary work. They want to have good outcomes for us. And those are the type of people that should be encouraged to run for office, and they should be elected. And people should stop basing it off of who's what party and think about the responsible party. You know, are these the people who are going to do whatever it takes to get us to where we need to go to get out of this mess that we're in right now? Because we are in a mess. And the people who are willing to do the good, hard, and necessary work. And that's why I keep positioning myself as somebody who is going to be a leader of the free world. You know, I am intending to bring forth all of my plans and my proposals and to offer it to people to start leading in that direction to help to build out that future together. And I see the best position for me to be able to do that is to become president of the United States of America. I see myself as being able to get into that role and to do right by the people, you know. And in order to win in 2028, you need to have somebody who is not only a show horse and not only a workhorse, but is also a racehorse that is able to get us where we need to go on time, on schedule, you know, and to the place where we would actually want to go. And I can be all of those things. I care deeply about everybody. I have good character. I have personally developed out of a, you know, continuum of a life filled with many challenges and experiences that have been extremely difficult. I have learned how the American struggle is so hard, and American success has always been the thing out of my reach. But that's because I was aiming for something so much higher than what America had offering for me at that time. And I see myself as aiming for president so that I can raise the standard in America so there's more opportunities for people so they're not wasted potential. You know, I want people to be able to live an amazing experience. I want their lives to be good. I don't want them to just work, you know, and that's all that they do. I want them to enjoy life and to have the opportunity to do that in America, to be a place that they can do that. I want America to be a place worth traveling to again. I want immigrants to want to come here and be a part of this experience with us because they help to make everything work so much better. Like, we are so dependent on them, you know, and we must be super grateful for them. We have to value and respect all lives. You know, and you don't have to hate anybody in order, or hurt anybody in order to, you know, become successful. And it's a very difficult lesson to learn in the way America's situation is right now, to think of yourself as somebody that can succeed without having to, you know, take on the dog eat dog, mighty crush the weak, free for all hellscape paradigm, which so many people have like rigged systems to work out. America doesn't work for me. Well, it's not meant to work for you. The way that it's designed is intended to, like, suppress you so you can be exploited and extracted from. Like, that's the paradigm we're in right now, you know? But it doesn't have to be that way, and I argue we can change it. And I want to invite everybody into the situation in which we can move past that, like, terrible paradigm, because it doesn't work out. You know, there will eventually be a point in time, even the people who think they're on the top of that pile, that it's going to all come crashing down because things that are not built on integrity always fall apart. You know, and there is a way for us to diverge from this terrible continuum, which will lead us down a path that will lead to self-destruction of the entire world, you know, or we can diverge and go somewhere where it's constructive and productive. It's conducive to our well-being. It's something that makes us happy. Makes us proud, you know, and wanting so very much to be like a welcoming invite for everyone to like imagine the possibilities that are just beyond where we are right now, to see within themselves and others the potential, you know, to do good and to contribute and to give, you know, what only they can give in terms of talents and experience that can help us to get where we need to go. And so have deep respect for everyone because everybody has their place of belonging. You know, I see the vast potential in everybody. I see vast potential even in this chaos. I see opportunity, you know. And I want to be able to transition out of this into something that can be, you know, a victory for us. Like, this is a failure in human society. It's a failure of the, you know, nation state of America. It's a failure of the world that we are living through an experience right now. But that doesn't have to be our fate, sealed, signed forever. You know, we could choose a new path for ourselves. And we can become something so much more. And I want us to lean in that direction. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity we have right now for people that are waking up, that were lost in, you know, this deception before of thinking like everything was fine when clearly it wasn't. And they're waking up into the reality. It's like no time better than now to like raise your hand and say, hey, everybody, you want change? You want something different? You want to have good experiences for a change? Like, how about we do this? You know? And I have the potential to fulfill this role. I know I'm not what people in, you know, the traditional sense of like, this is what, you know, somebody would say is a candidate material or something like that. I'm not here to play politics. You know, I'm not here to campaign platitude and false promise you anything. I'm here to say this is going to take a lot of hard work, but I have an idea of how to get us there, and it's going to take all of us involving. I can't, but we can. You know, be a part of this process so you can take pride in it and then leave your old past mistakes behind you, you know, without regret, and live on into the future together in an experience that we can all be proud of, an America that's worth defending, you know, and create a world paradigm in which like the useless, the antiquated, the old, the obsolete, the terrible, you know, paradigm is rendered obsolete. It is rendered nullified, you know, because we're living in a new paradigm that is much better. We have all the potential within ourselves to do that. And in that, it doesn't take for us to attack anybody, you know, or to make anybody out to be like the villain of the situation. Are there some bad actors with nefarious intent that we must prevent them from doing harm to everybody? Absolutely. You know, but there's also opportunities for them to redeem themselves if they so choose, where they can come back and reintegrate back into society and be a part of the positive process with us too. That's where I hope for them to be. Will they necessarily take up that opportunity? I don't know. That is entirely up to how they choose to orient their, you know, egos and what they base their reputation on, and whether they're willing to go through the process of humbling themselves to the situation of like, what you did wrong by all of us. And now we have a really bad situation that we all have to deal with. And this is where we are moving forward. What are you going to do to help us to solve for this? So it's going to take a lot of work. I know that there's a lot of potential in everybody, and I hope for, you know, this opportunity where we're seeing ourselves right now. The present situation is terrible. You know, like, I'm not trying to gloss it over as if I don't have worry and concern. I've made plenty of videos, you know, voiced my opinion on how terribly shitty I think everything is, and how absolutely appalling it is, and how wrong it is, and how frustrated I am with people. I've flared up my righteous anger. That's not what this is about. This is about saying, like, this is where we are. This is where we've gotten ourselves to, but we need to get out of this situation, and the best way to move forward is to find a way that we can reasonably come to terms with one another to say, you know, we got to work something out here that is beneficial for everybody, because the trajectory we're on's not conducive to well-being, and we need to move in a direction that will lead us that way. And I'm offering that. You know, welfare and stewardship is a way for us to all get on the same page and work together. You know, becoming eudaimonian, which is, you know, we live the good life. You know, we're living the embodiment of happiness. You know, and we're spreading that, and we're growing in that space, and we're giving ourselves safe space to live out good experiences. You know, and we're learning through the process of grieving to forgive what's happened in the past, and to embrace where we are right now, because we have to do good work to get us to where we're going in the future. And we can't leave anybody behind. We need everybody involved. You know, it's less about, you know, punishing the mistakes that people made in the past, and more about embracing the potential that they have to redeem themselves in the future, and to give them opportunities to do that. Encourage them and invite them into those experiences, you know, and also like recognizing like This is a learning opportunity for everybody. This is a growing process, and America is still the great experiment. And now we have a chance to try something totally new. I suggest we default back into alignment with the law because we are not a nation if we don't have laws. We were founded off of laws, So, reconform back, bring it on home to the basic principles of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, realign our American identity as being, eudaimonian, welfaring stewards, give ourselves the purpose, make this a place of belonging for everybody and make sure everybody is doing the good work, participating and contributing to making this a reality. And America can really become, ever more healthy, sustainable, just and peaceful, resilient place where everybody can belong and nobody gets left behind. Everybody lives the good life. And with that, I really hope that this is a sensibility, this offering for growth and potential, and it's a way to get us out of where we are right now that we don't want to be into somewhere where we would actually want to go. And I hope that you're hearing in this a sensibility that I have what it takes to encourage people and to invite people in and to inspire people and to activate people and to get people understanding that, they're powerful, they're capable, they're change agents, and all it's going to take is just a little bit of support, a little bit of capital and a little bit of resource in the right ways, empowering people to invest in their human ingenuity and work towards a collective purpose, a collective goal, collective vision and direction that we're moving ourselves in. And I think that's all that we really need in order to move us in the right direction. We only have to make a slight pivot in order for us to be diverged and moving in a new continuum. So I'm hoping that we can all get on that same page. I understand there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be rejecting this sense, like it can't be that simple, or, like they don't want to move in that direction because the status quo is, comfortable to them, or, it's where they make their, where they base their reputations on, or where they make their money and these sorts of things. So there's going to be some people that are going to hardline reject this, and maybe even try to become opposition to this. And I understand that. I understand where people come from in terms of being that, in that position and choosing to be in that place. But it's my intent to constantly welcome them into the situation in which we all can thrive on, and help them to, let go of those things that no longer serve them because it doesn't serve everyone. And we don't want them to be left behind either. And I really hope that we can stay in that sensibility of we have to find a way to, we're not holding hands in kumbaya, but we are coming together in mutual respects for mutual benefits and mutual securities, and understanding we have to be honest with each other and to build trust with one another, because we are all that we have. The world is becoming a more contentious place, and America has to shore up its weaknesses and build up its resilience at home and build up coherence here, so that we can, again, send out that signal, that vibe to everybody else to say, this is how we become a more coherent and cohesive world. We have to start working together in these good ways, And in America, we have to, really reimagine the way that we do this thing called government, because it was managed to be, hijacked and turned into a unitary power, and we're no longer a republic or a democracy, and we don't have separations of powers. All of those limits are being tested and pushed and broken right now. And that just shows inherent weakness in the system, and not because it's broken, but it's flawed and it needs to be made more functional. And to do that, we have to reimagine how we do this thing we call government. And I believe that is by empowering all American citizens to become part of a civics branch of government. Actually bring the people into, the role of government, create a fourth branch, another separation of powers. This is important. This is good. It's a dispersal of power, and to move it down to the smallest concentration of power, which is the individual and the personal dominion, and then to create more ancillary protections for, the people. So you have personal dominion, you have local, and then you have state, and then you have federal law. And those levels of governance help to keep us all, in safe operating space. Boundaries are the distance by which I can love myself and you simultaneously. And we need to have that so we can maintain mutualisms, mutual respects, and whatnot. And then have 4 branches of government so that we can have checks and balances on those systems, so they are anti-corruption mechanisms and corrective mechanisms when things get out of hand. Where you see right now where Congress isn't doing its job to put a check on the executive branch, and the judicial branch is falling in line with the executive branch. And because of that, and we've been able to capture all this power, and one person has been able to pinnacle all this power, and they're wielding it in ways that are harmful to everybody. Your cost of living has gone up. You've been put in a more precarious situation. More people have been impoverished. What was left of the middle class is gone. Life is going to get worse far before it's going to get better, because the people who are in decision making right now have no intentions on changing their ways or improving the circumstance. They're digging in and going all in with the things that are making things worse. They're not willing to stop and recognize, oh, that thing harms people. Like, they're focusing more on doing more of that instead of doing anything that is helpful to you. What I'm offering is something that's going to, improve your cost of living. It's going to improve your living situation. It's going to improve your sensibilities. It's going to improve your life experience, and it's not going to be because you're getting a hand up or a hand out. It's an opportunity of a fair shake. You will be a self-determined, self-reliant person, and you'll be working together to help to make America self-reliant so that we can help other nations to become more self-reliant. And so nobody is in this precarious situation in which, one misstep and pissing off the wrong person, they can all of a sudden cut off our energy sources and the cost of everything goes up, and now everybody is penny pinching and suffering. That should never be the situation. We need to create every nation as an island of coherence, self-reliant nations working together in mutualisms to make sure we're shoring up our weaknesses and we're supporting each other how we need to, but never leaving anybody in a precarious situation where we're left to the whims or the wills of, one person that could deviate from a plan that's, feasible for everybody's best interest, to assume, unitary type power and start dictating to the world how they get to live. That's where we're at right now, and it's a terrible place. You have to agree. There's nothing about the way things are going right now that is good. And we can change that intentionally, choose a better path, and I just pray that everybody's just like, okay, we can, and focus on that. In order for me to be able to do what I know I can do, I need to get support and help from you, which means that I need you to take me seriously, first of all. Second of all is to listen to the things that I've been saying and consider them, and consider yourself, how would that change my life? Envision yourself in that potential future and see if you actually want to be involved in that. Convince yourself, I'm not here to impress myself upon you. I'm here to leave you and wonder about what I mentioned. Here's a potential, dude. I see the potential in you. You want to be a part of this? Great. Let's work together. Again, I'm not here to go and campaign rally like traditional politics has been in America. To me, that's not satisfying. It's not interesting. I'm perfectly fine with talking in front of people for hours on end, obviously, about ideas and concepts and my enthusiasm and to champion for people's success. I'm all about that kind of stuff. That's great. But I want something that's constructive and productive. This to me is constructive and productive because it's an annals of record in time for people when they finally do catch on to who I am, have something to look back on and reference to see, continuity of character. Know where I'm coming from, know who I am, know what I'm about. Know what matters to me. What's the attitude and direction of my heart? This is important for you to know and understand. Because there's only going to be so much time before, you're going to get to know me and meet me, and you're going to have to make a decision whether you're going to place trust in me. And I need to build up some sensibility for you to get to know me because, I'm not, some movie star, and I'm not some TV character, and I'm not, some high-end, high-profile business person, or, somebody on the public stage as a high influencer. I'm not a media mogul. I'm just a regular, everyday American citizen that is sick and tired of seeing things go to shit, and I want things to get better, and I've thought about it deeply about how we might be able to fix things. And I see a reasonable path by which we can do that, and I'm willing to, give my life in service to helping to accomplish this, to make it happen, because somebody's got to do it, And if you want something done, done right, you got to do it your damn self in many cases, And again, I see myself as being, somebody that can be that racehorse and run the race to be able to win, to become president. But I also see myself as, the show horse, because I'm not so bad on the eyes. And, I have an interesting personality. I'm a little peculiar, but it's makes people be curious about me, And I am a workhorse. I know how to put in the good, hard, and necessary work, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get us where we need to go, because I don't want us to be, heading in the trajectory of a negative outcome consequence on a continuum of negative outcome consequences. I want us to be on a continuum of an imperishable world peace. And that's where I hope that you would like to go with me. With that, thank you for your valuable time, attention, and consideration. Until next time, I appreciate you. Be well.